Back to Neuroconversant Leadership, where we talk about effective communication in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran. I help engineers, doctors, and scientists become great leaders. Have you ever wondered what makes people good communicators? And have you wondered what separates good communicators from the great? Today we have Brendan Kumarasami, and he's the founder of MasterTalk. It's a coaching business designed to help ambitious executives and business owners become top 1% communicators in their field. I think the name of his website kind of says it all. It's rockstarcommunicator.com. Brendan, welcome.
Jeremy, the pleasure is mine. Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and then maybe how you got into that in the first place?
Absolutely, Jeremy. So my origin story was, funny enough, in college when I studied in accounting, completely the opposite of what I do today. But I always thought I was a numbers guy. So I tried to get a job at one of the big four accounting firms. I wasn't really looking to be a speech coach. And during my journey there, I started competing in these things called case competitions, Jeremy. Think of them like hackathons in the computer science world, but for business school students, where you have to pitch a solution of how to solve a problem to a group of executives who work at that company. And the reason these competitions exist is the recruitment tool for the best and brightest who then get corporate job offers post-grad. So I started competing in these competitions for fun because I wanted a job. And then as I got older, I accidentally developed a passion for A, those competitions, and B, coaching other people. But I wasn't really doing it as a profession initially. I was coaching the other students to win competitions, and I accidentally developed a gift in speech coaching. So while I was working at IBM, I started making YouTube videos on communication, and the rest was history.
How long were you at IBM?
I was at IBM for 2.5 years.
Okay. And then after that, did you just launch your own business? And
That's correct. So I was actually building it in parallel to working at IBM. So the first year of IBM, I wasn't really taking MasterTalk that seriously as a business because my goal was to be an executive at the company.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really looking to be a business owner. But then I met the right mentors and people, and I slowly built up the client base. And then I got to a point where I was able to quit my job, so I jumped ship.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jeremy.
It seems like that's the dream of 80 to 90% of everyone, and then only 5% ever actually do it.
Absolutely, Jeremy. And the reason is because I believe business owners, and the reason why a lot of us can't really do business or be in entrepreneurship is because it requires a quality that, honestly, a lot of us as human beings have trouble building, which is the ability to change one's mind based on new ideas and information that come into a system. And if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be really hard to be successful in business.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because I will sometimes just get into what I think are friendly debates with my friends, and they will not give me anything. They won't even answer my questions because they think that all I'm doing is trying to find a way to prove them wrong. I'm like, no, if you win, I will be perfectly happy because I'll have learned something. And they just don't believe it because it's so outside of their normal frame of reference.
Absolutely. There's a great quote on this that I'm going to butcher, Jeremy, that I got from Alex Hormozi. And the quote reads, we challenge our beliefs except the ones that we fundamentally believe in. And those beliefs we never choose to question at all. And that's where the detriment is, unfortunately.
That's a good one. I'm going to look that up. So you told us a little bit about how you got into this. Can you tell us a little bit more of the mechanics? What is it that you're actually doing and what problems are you solving?
Yeah, for sure, Jeremy. So obviously at the beginning when I started MasterTalk in 2019, so it's been 5 years now, when I started it, there wasn't that many mechanics. It was just mostly a conversation around, I have these tips that I have on communication that I'm sharing, that I'm kind of inventing on the spot, because I didn't really have a coach when I was in college. Couldn't afford one. My parents were factory workers, so I never thought coaching was a thing. And then when I started at IBM, I was watching other communication experts share ideas that I used to hate, but that now, honestly, now that I'm more mature, they're honestly my colleagues and friends, and I really appreciate the work that they do. But at the time, I kind of saw them as my enemies because I saw a huge misalignment. But that misalignment didn't come from a lack of skill. It came from a misalignment of a lot of the people who post content in communication coaching, I found out later, are very academic. So they have PhDs in communication. They went to Stanford, they went to an Ivy League school, or they went to some university in the United States. So they share from that frame. So they're like faculty professors. Whereas the frame I brought was like, because I'm coaching people directly, if what I say doesn't work, I'll know right away. So I'll just change that information based on that. So it mostly just started as sharing free content. MasterTalk was a hobby. But then as my channel evolved, as the business that was created eventually evolved too, is I realized there was a very specific group of people, this is what you learn in business, who will pay for the service versus just watch the free content, which is totally fine. That's the mission. And I realized, and I think you'll resonate with this because that's your audience, I basically came to terms with two main clientele that I work with, which is pretty much 80 to 90% of my client base. Number one is the women executive, who is either a VP or above in any industry. And their challenge is that they feel really lonely in the boardroom. They're usually the only women there. They're having trouble communicating in a world of men, and they have to really get their voice heard and really speak very, very well so that they keep getting promoted. Mm-hmm. And the second type is the STEM executive, right? The manager at Amazon who's a very technical, who's very strong at what they do, but eventually their technical skill set blocks them in middle management because they realize that engineering schools did not teach them the valuable skill of leadership and leading teams, which is what you need, obviously, as you know, I'm sure, to keep moving up in the corporate world.
So when you talk about on your webpage becoming a 1% communicator, that sounds very much like a thing STEM people would like because it's so measurable, but how do you measure that?
I get that question a lot. So let's define terms here. Because obviously part of it is sexy marketing too, so let's be honest about that too. But the idea is, let's be clear, top 1% communicator in your industry. So in your industry means if you're a software engineer listening to this, if you're an aerospace engineer, if you're a medical doctor, the frame of this conversation, Jeremy, is you versus 99 other people in the same profession as you, in the same room as you. So how do you best those people? Well, STEM, the conversation is very easy. And I'll measure it this way, because obviously it's not very easy to measure like a weight loss goal would be. But let me give it through an example. So let's say we take one of my easiest exercises, which scared to death a STEM person, is the random word exercise, where you take a word like phone or camera or house and you create a random presentation out of thin air for 60 seconds on the spot. And I'll just preempt this so you know I'm talking to the right audience. Why do engineers or people in STEM are afraid of that? Because their education, rightfully so, is based on structured thinking. It's how do we follow a specific structure and lining thread to achieve a result, whereas communication fundamentally at the highest level is unstructured. There's going to be situations where you're just being thrown in, you got to figure it out, and that scares the crap out of this audience for sure. So that's number one. It's just now, and the last piece, sorry, for the ramble, is how many times do you do the random word exercise? Well, most people in STEM aren't willing to do it once, so if you do it 100 times, you're definitely going to be in that top percentile.
So is that what you think the biggest communication hurdle is? The kind of extemporizing? I can't think of the right word, but being extemporaneous.
Yeah, like speaking without preparation, absolutely. So the idea, Jeremy, here's the way, like, to take an engineer's perspective. The way I thought about it is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. Right, so one of them's eye contact, one of them's knowing how to smile, one of them's knowing when to be technical, when to be more business-like, when you're speaking to a different department within a business you're operating within. Another one's storytelling, another one is body language, and the list could go on forever. So the question we need to ask ourselves, and that I've asked myself, frankly, as a person in this field, to make this easy for people, is what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle? Because if you know how to juggle those balls, you can get not 100%, but you can definitely get half of the results very relatively quickly. And the first of those balls is definitely, to your point, Jeremy, the random word exercise. It's impromptu speaking. It's speaking without any form of preparation. If you can master that, I think you're definitely going to gain a bulk of skill set that definitely STEM executives, in general, I found from my experience, don't normally possess.
I take improv classes and do improv shows, and it's amazing how terrified people are of the idea of doing improv. They just go running. They're like, no way. But it's so much fun. You get to just be a kid.
Oh, I'm with you, and I can empathize with the audience. I actually, even if I'm a communication coach, I've done two improv classes, and the first one definitely scared me too. I was like, oh my god, you just have to present in front of a theater. The second time I got used to it, but yeah, definitely, totally.
So you talked about one of the balls. What are the two other main ones?
You're a very attentive listener. I love that. So that's number one, right? The random word exercise. Take words. Do this with your friends. Practice. And the first couple of times, most of the engineers I coach, English is not their first language. So the first 10 to 20 times they'll do it, they'll really be bad at it. They'll go, look, a tissue box is a box that I guess I have in my kitchen. And then after that, what starts to happen is you start to get comfortable. You stop caring. And that's when you start to have more fun and you get the hold of the exercise. That's one. Let's go to number two, which is Q. I call this RQV, by the way. So R stands for the random word exercise, and Q stands for the question drill. So I'll tell you a story, Jeremy. A few years ago, when I started guesting on podcasts, I was horrible. Terrible, terrible. I remember some guy asked me, hey, Brendan, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at the guy and I was like, I don't know, man. New York City? Florida? London? You tell me. So I was really embarrassed. So how did I fix this, Jeremy? I told myself I would need to know the answer to 95% of these questions. This is 5 years ago when I started, so that my executives take me really seriously as their coach. So every single day, Jeremy, I answered one question about speaking, my expertise. So one day was, what's your vision for MasterTalk? Day two is, what tips do you have for introverted speakers? Day three is, how do you use body language effectively? But if you do that every single day, Jeremy, for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise, and you'll pretty much be bulletproof. So going back to that 1% conversation, the way I measure it is mostly through output. So I'll say, cool, let's think about this in the context of our interviews. Let's say I'm in a group of STEM executives, I'm talking to them. How many of you have ever written a list of questions for job interviews that you're doing, whether it's for upper management or middle management in an engineering department, that you've prepared in this way? Maybe 30% of the hands go up, and I go, great, that's awesome. How many of you did that with 100 interview questions? All their hands go down. And I go, exactly. That's really the difference between somebody who's trying to master communication skills and technical skills to get the right combination for both.
That's interesting. And one thing I've found, it's political season right now, at least in the U.S., and they have their answer, and it almost doesn't matter what question you ask them. They're going to find a way to make the answer they want to give match your question. How often is that a useful tool for people in your area where they kind of have, they know where they want to go?
For sure, Jeremy. You brought up a very interesting, and yes, even if I don't live in the U.S., obviously everyone follows U.S. politics. It's so much more fun than Canadian politics, trust me. And what I'll say is, that is true. What you said is absolutely correct. They'll find ways to evade the question, but we also both know that does not fly in corporate, because if you're a director of engineering and you dodge a question from your VP, the VP is just going to look at you and go, what are you talking about? Like, what's the deadline of the project? Don't just evade me. So they'll challenge you in front of everyone and really make sure, because they got to make sure, because they're next on the line for the project. Right. So that doesn't work as well. I think the better solution, that will take longer to practice, obviously, is to reflect on last week. So let's say I'm coaching a director of engineering in any space, whether it's software, whether it's core engineering, whether it's mechanical, it's all the same advice, which is just reflect on the 5 to 10 questions you had difficulty answering or some trouble answering this week from somebody in upper management. So one of those examples could be, hey, what's the update on the project that you're working on? So a lot of people, even when they're already executives, they answer that question in circles. They go, oh, Jeremy, I talked to IT, then I talked to HR, then I talked to this person. And then I go, no, that's not how you answer it. You have to get to the point, acknowledge them, give them the 3 main updates, and then just say you're done and say you're open to feedback. That's it. So you practice that question over a voice note, and then the quality of your answer just improves over time, and you get more confident over time as well.
I love that. I work with a lot of engineers as well. And one thing I'll always tell them is, your boss doesn't want the story unless they ask for it. They want the answer. So if they ask you, what's in the broom closet, your answer is a broom. It's not, well, I went into the broom closet and I saw, it's like, nope, just give them the answer. They'll ask for details if they want them.
Exactly. You're absolutely right, and you simplified that really well. They'll ask for the details they want them, and the best part is if you show a coachable frame, they'll give you that feedback in between meetings on how they want to be communicated to. And if you just implement that feedback, you'll be fine in corporate. Just most engineers don't make that effort. I think that's just a challenge.
I think not just engineers, most people don't make that either because they're too scared to ask, or it doesn't even occur to them that someone would be different than them. So I always encourage people, like, ask how do you want this information given to you, and they'll tell you.
Absolutely. One cool trick I have, since we're talking about meetings, is a framework I teach called ACE. So every time you're in a meeting, always think of acing that meeting. And ACE, pretty much what you said, stands for acknowledge, count, and evaluate. So acknowledge just means, this is my signature communication move. I always tell my clients to tell everybody to say, great to see you. So you don't have to tell a 10-minute story about your dog, right? But you still want to build a relationship. So let's say you're my boss at work, Jeremy, and you're going, hey, Brendan, what's the update? I'll always start my show with, great to see you, Jeremy. Hope you had a great weekend. So you just feel better. So that's A. C is counting how many updates you have. Once again, to your point, it's not a mistake that engineers only make. Everybody makes it. They kind of just talk in meetings. Versus if you go, hey, great to see you, Jeremy. I have 3 updates to share with you right now. Then the person knows, thank God, Brendan's going to stop talking after 3 shares. And the last piece, this is like my little sneaky trick, as at the end, is even if the share is correct, Jeremy, they'll just stop talking. They'll go, and then the executive looks at them and goes, are you done? They go, yeah, I'm done. So just end with, that's it from my side, happy to take your feedback. So if you say those words exactly every time, eventually they'll just go, oh, well, you were asking for feedback, so they'll tell you to informally. So there you go.
That is wonderful. You can see people visibly relax sometimes when you let them know what's coming. I've got 3 points to make. They're like, okay. And then they know kind of how close to the end they are. That's fantastic.
1,000%.
So that was 2 of the 3 balls, right?
Absolutely.
All right. What's number 3?
And number 3 is the third piece of RQV, which stands for the video message. So the video message is very simple. All you have to do is pick somebody in your life. It could be a friend. It could be somebody close to you. Open your phone and do something that most STEM executives would be scared to death of doing, which is send them a 20-second video message. And all you have to do is tell them one thing you're grateful for them and one thing you appreciate about them. That's it. And there's only one rule to the video message. Just one. You're not allowed to retake the video. Very simple. And then the other piece that I'll just add as a bonus, this is what I do. I send around, just last week, this is a real story. I literally sent 150 video messages last week. That's how crazy I am. But that's mostly for prospecting reasons. But I do something else called the birthday video message, where when it's my client's birthday or a best friend, a business partner's birthday, I'll put a $15 birthday hat on, Jeremy, and I'll send them a video message on their birthday. Google Calendar helps me sort that out, so it tells me whose birthday it is that day. So that's also what I do.
So some of that is just getting yourself comfortable with it and just doing it over and over again.
Absolutely.
It's funny doing podcasting. No one likes the sound of their own voice. And someone gave me the advice, listen to yourself 100 days in a row. And then all of a sudden your voice sounds just fine because you've heard it so much that you no longer have an issue.
100%. And the analogy, I love that advice. That's excellent advice. And then the piece that I would build on that, the same rule applies to speaking. And engineers know this, right? They know that if I want to be a better coder, I got to code more. If I want to get better at aerospace engineering, you should probably work on more airplanes, right? It's the idea of doing it more. But that analogy does not translate over to communication. Oh, wait a second. If I want to get better at speaking, I have to do the random word exercise 100 times? I have to do 100 question drills? I have to send 100 video messages? Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me, but it really does at the end of the day. And there you go.
But I totally get how they don't want to do it. I, quite frankly, if I can avoid calling to order food from a pizza place or Chinese food, I will have someone else do it every time because I just don't want to pick up that phone and make that call.
I'm sometimes guilty of that too, so there you have it.
But then in my younger days when I was first getting into sales, I'm about about as introverted as you can get. So I figured what I'm going to do, which was advice from someone else, is talk to people in elevators. There is nothing more awkward than talking to people in elevators. So anytime I got in an elevator, I would turn around and start talking. And it was hilarious because you could see the look of horror on their faces. They're like, oh my God, someone's going to talk to me in the elevator. But if I could keep them entertained for the 30 seconds it took, then it was great practice.
That's a fun tip. I love that. Never heard of that one before. So really, really good insight.
Yeah, it's really jumping right into the fire, trying to talk to people on elevators.
I love it. My version of that is whenever you go up to people, ask them questions that you wished other people asked you. So that way you get to have a conversation with yourself around questions you want to answer. So, for example, if you ever met me in person, I'll never ask you about the weather because you can just look outside. That's what the weather is. I always just go like, what is the most exciting thing in your life right now? Like, what are you excited about? And I just like to listen to people's dreams. And a lot of people are lazy in conversation. So they'll answer the question and then they'll go, what about you? So you basically just get to answer whatever you're asking.
That's interesting because what I've found is people very rarely ask those sorts of questions back. Usually they will just answer. And there are times when I would ask them a question that was pretty deep. And then once in a while they would turn around and say, how about you? I'm like, oh, dear Lord, I didn't even think of my answer. I have to think of it on the spot because I just assumed you wouldn't ask back, but they did.
There you go. So those are the keepers. Well, unless you want to avoid those people. I guess it depends who you are. But
So in the interest of time, and because we do have some other things, you talked about letting people discuss things or you asking them questions that you want to answer. What is a question about communication I haven't asked you that you think would be a great topic for this?
For sure, Jeremy. That's a great question. I don't get asked that one. Since you said your audience at the beginning, listening to your podcast intro, was people in the STEM space, I think one piece we haven't talked about yet is really emphasizing the why communication is so important. So we went through the 3 main tips, which are easy to implement. RQV. Put 50 minutes in your schedule. Do this with yourself. Do this with your teams on a Friday meeting. Just say, hey, let's all do the random word exercise when some crazy guy, 2 crazy guys on a podcast told me to do this, right, etc. But what engineers I feel don't really get, and this is true to doctors and the audience list that you brought up at the beginning of the show, Jeremy, is they don't really understand why they have to get better at speaking. So here's the picture I would paint. From experience of working with a lot of these engineers, is you could have a very great career without knowing how to speak that well. So I've seen a lot of software engineers, for example, from India, who immigrate to the US on an H-1B visa or an L-1, and they'll have a fantastic career. They'll do really well for the first 5-10 years of the organization. They'll code the deliverable. They'll get the job done. They'll work relentless hours to get things into post-production, all that fun stuff. And the reason is because the reward is directly related to the deliverable they are giving either internally to the business or to the client externally that they're managing. Let's say they work at an IBM or an Accenture. But at some point they block. And the reason they block is because the people in management, not everybody, but I'd say most engineering management are talented in both areas. So they're both very technical people and they're fantastic communicators because they realize at the management level, you're not coding anymore. You're not in the deep deliverable of the work. You might oversee it a little bit, but mostly your job is to organize the different resources on the team to make sure the deliverable gets done and to lead them to that result. And if you're not able to master that second piece, you could still have a great career in engineering, but it's going to be really hard for you to move into leadership. And somebody told me this. I don't remember who it was exactly, so I'm going to take credit for it. He's like a senior director of engineering at Google, and he said this really well. He says, I know when somebody's ready for management when they're not, because you'll ask them one specific question, and the question is, tell me a story about somebody you developed at work and what result they got. And you can tell on their face the reaction, because if they go, oh, nobody really comes to mind, that person is an IC, right, an individual contributor. But if that second person, that second engineer goes, oh, I developed Jerome and Julia, and this is what happened to them, and these are the sessions I had with them, this is how they got to the next level, then that person's ready for management.
I love that. Um, what I'll tell people is it's not the best idea that wins. It's the good idea that's explained the best. And so even in your job, if you're not going to become a manager or a leader, the ability to communicate what your idea is still crucial.
Completely agree with that, and I'm going to steal that one for the future. That's really good. Totally
you don't have
agree.
to steal it. You can have it.
There you go.
All right. So I end every episode with 3 questions. First one's part A and B, and I'm going to ask you now is what is a place you have traveled and loved to travel to, and a place you have not yet been but want to go?
Yeah, definitely, Jeremy. So the place I've not yet been that I need to go to at some point in my life is Tokyo, Japan. I'm a very big fan of Japanese culture. I watch a lot of Japanese TV shows, and I'm really immersed in the culture, and I've never been, and I really need to go. And sort of the place I always go that I love to visit, it's not super romantic. It is Toronto, Canada, a 6-hour drive from my house, because my family lives there. So I always love taking a Christmas vacation for them where 2 weeks I'll do nothing. It's the only 2 to 3 weeks in a year where I'm not a workaholic, where I'll sit there and I'll eat a bunch of fried chicken and watch a ton of horror movies that are terrible, and that's how I'd love to spend my vacation. Though it doesn't last long, because after actually it's not even 2 weeks, it's 8 days. Because after 8 days of me doing nothing, I start getting fidgety again, and then I go back to work.
Yep, that's how it goes. And I've been getting a lot of Japan answers for places that people want to go lately. So you're in good company. All right. Question 2 is who is a great communicator, whether in your life, public figure, historical, anything?
For sure, Jeremy. My personal favorite speaker of all time is probably Tony Robbins. I love the way that Tony conveys his ideas. He's a very unique type of speaker. I've seen him in person twice now, and I've seen him speak virtually a few other times. And the rumors are true. He literally stands there and speaks for 12 hours straight. It is very wild. Obviously, these days he's getting a little bit older now, so now he's taking breaks in between. But when I first saw him speak, this is probably 4 years ago, I was astounded by his ability to keep a crowd's energy going, and it's something that is truly a category of one. I was like, how does this guy even go to the bathroom? Like, doesn't he take breaks in between? So yes, he has some weaknesses in speaking, but I do think he's the greatest speaker currently alive right now.
That's incredible. I don't know how his voice holds out that long.
Yeah, he does a lot of work with his voice too, but now it's starting to hurt. That's why he's toning down, because he's like in his late 60s now, I believe, like mid or late 60s.
Still young.
Still young, absolutely. Just for his voice, I think he's just spoken a lot over 40 years.
A lot of hours.
Yeah.
All right, and the third question is, what is one piece of communication advice we can all benefit from?
For sure, Jeremy. I would say my last communication advice I'd give you is I believe the biggest challenge of communication, a lot of experts in my field argue it's fear. I don't think it's fear. I actually think it's motivation. Because there's a lot of things in our life that we've been scared of that we did anyways. Getting our first job, asking somebody out on a date, immigrating to a new country. We've done things that are very difficult, not because we weren't scared. We were scared, but because the motivation was much higher, whether it's providing a better opportunities for our families, whether it's having a family, like asking somebody on the date to have eventually be with the right person, or getting a job, right, or starting a company. So the question I would leave your audience with as my piece of advice here is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? If you start to reflect on just that simple question, you'll find reasons that are innately valuable to you. And that doesn't have to be getting your next promotion, to your point, Jeremy. It could also just be, I want to be the best father. I want to be the best mother in the world. And that also can be reason enough to be a better communicator.
That is a really good piece of advice that we have not heard on here before. So thank you for that.
Of course.
All right, Brendan, how can people reach out and find out more information about you, or reach out and get in contact?
For sure, Jeremy. Great to be on your show, by the way. Thanks for having me. 2 easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is you can add me on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Master Your Talk. Your is spelled Y-O-U-R, so Master Your Talk. You can just send me a DM and let me know that you listened to this episode and what lesson you took away, and I'll send you a voice note. And the second way to keep in touch, like we talked about earlier, is I do a free training every 2 weeks, the Zoom call. It's 90 minutes. It's absolutely free. And if you want to join that live call with me, it's rockstarcommunicator.com. So I hope to see you there.
Perfect. When this is coming out, I will put a link in.
Anyways.
All right. This has been fantastic, Brendan. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
Of course, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Neuroconversant Leadership. If you found this beneficial, can you do me one small favor? It'll be quick, I promise. Can you go and give this podcast a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen before doing anything else? Unless you're driving. If you're driving, then I need you to keep driving. And then when you're done and parked, then go ahead and give me a review. Hopefully 5 stars, but whatever you are comfortable honestly giving. Thank you and have a great day.